Hey, Brandon's here. I'm here. It's Trash Talk. It's Tuesday morning, eight
Yeah,
o'clock. Time for another podcast. And that actually is our subject. We
it
talked
is.
about we were talking about our history of podcasting and what it's like to get into podcasts.
Don't do it, guys.
Yeah, yeah. Our advice, don't step on our toes. But
It's in, it's
you've been doing this
interesting.
how many years now?
My very first podcast I started, or that I was on, and then I was kind of like a host or co-host with, and then it was probably 8 years ago, maybe. My podcast that I currently have is approaching, I think it's at the 3 year mark. Um, and then I've been on several others, but the one I started it was a buddy of mine back in Detroit, and he was doing a podcast. It was a lot more difficult 8 years ago than it is now to start one. We didn't have the apps and all that. There were certain platforms you had to do. You didn't have the ability to record from your phone. You definitely had to do it. But he did it because he was in radio a lot, much like you. And I got on his show, and I was doing it from here, from Texas,
Oh,
doing
that
it.
long ago you were doing remote.
Yeah, yeah. And it was not as easy. You could do it, but there was a lot of times I never got to see his face. We would do some YouTube stuff and then record it off of YouTube but there was a lot of challenges. And then eventually he just, went and decided to get married, which was dumb. And he stopped doing the podcast. He's still in radio, but he stopped doing the podcast, and I get it. But he did it for a while, and then I was working for a local publication, which is how we met, and they started doing a podcast, and I was doing it with them. Um, and I did that for a while up until COVID,
Right.
and then that. Right, when the time I was doing that podcast with them, I had started my Life of an Average Joe podcast and was kind of getting that in the ground, figuring it out and all that. And then we started Trash Talk during COVID, and here we are.
And I think it's fair to say there's probably thousands of people that started doing podcasts because of COVID, because everything became virtual. You just couldn't go out, and also everybody learned how to use Zoom and I forgot what I used to use before Zoom. Um,
Well,
but
there's so many of them. I mean,
yeah,
social media platforms for a while there until Zuckerberg basically killed that, which hurt. It definitely hurt. They started to adapt podcasting and other social media. I still think there's a market for it, but they want the money. And then Spotify for podcasters. They got the Rec Room, and then of course they bought Anchor and made it Spotify for podcasters. And there's so many of them now. That are good on the audio for free, but then there's also ones that you get paid plans. And I think the paid plans definitely offer significance, especially for doing video. But there's
right.
so many opportunities now to do the editing and all that with, especially the Spotify for podcasters. Now, when they bought Anchor, you could edit directly from your phone. They've just announced that starting in June, you will no longer be able to edit from your phone. Now,
Oh, really?
I don't know what the reasoning is behind that. They're going to make you go to a laptop. I don't know if they're trying to implement new tools or if they're going to start charging. I don't know.
Well,
Um,
or they want you to pick up on a editing app or something.
Probably.
You take your show and you put it into an editing vehicle, and then you edit it from there.
Well, that was the thing back in the day. The distribution, when you used to distribute your podcast, you would have to go to each platform, Amazon, Apple, Google. And now you just go to Spotify Podcasts and they'll send it out to, like I said, I checked the other day I mean, I have my top like 8 or 10 that I get most of my stuff from.
Right.
But I the other day, and I think I was on 62 now. Platforms, which I don't even know what they are. And I know
I didn't
that
know there were that many.
I didn't know either, but I know
Yeah.
that we were digits. I mean, I know just on the basics, if you just look at the basic top 10, we're there for our trash talk, but we're on others. There's like 30 other ones that I don't even know of that people, I had a buddy of mine in Utah but he's back in Texas now. And he's like, man, I found your podcast on this. I used to listen to it all the time. I'm like, what the hell is that?
Well, and I think that those smaller platforms too, they're out looking for people like you that are doing a podcast on a regular basis, and they want to pick up on your podcast to add to their platform so that they can build up their following too.
The
Uh,
biggest the biggest thing is what I've seen, and I know you've seen it too. People get an idea, they just think, like you're sitting around COVID. Oh man, we have great conversations. Let's have a podcast. Okay, well that's great, and yeah, sure you can get decent mics, decent headphones, and all that for relatively cheap, and create a fun environment for you to record in. The funny thing is, when you're with your friends, everybody thinks it's a good conversation and funny. The question is, though, outside of those 5 people, are people going to listen to you? And how do you separate yourself and build an audience? You can't just put it out there and expect people to listen. It's not going to happen. I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not these big name guys. We're not Hollywood. So you have to sit there and really promote the heck out of it in the most unique and crazy ways and whatever you can. But a lot of these people don't realize, okay, you recorded two, 3 episodes. Now what? I tell everyone,
that's right.
You can't record 10 episodes. If you don't have 10 ideas right off the bat and you get those plugged in every week, drop that episode. If it's bi-weekly, fine. I'm not into that, but some people work. You drop them every week and you got 10 episodes. That'll get you far enough to where you can start to build momentum and actually think about something. But if you can't do 10 episodes and you're going to skip this week and come back to next week, and you're done. You're dead.
Yeah, obviously there's a heck of a lot more people that don't even make it through a year of podcasting because it's a flash in the pan. It's a lot of fun for a while, and then they either burn out or somebody says, I'm tired of doing this anymore. My show that started actually as a radio show, then it became a camera in studio, Facebook link up, and all through KVGI radio here in Frisco. And all my shows, someone you should know, I'm going into my 9th year.
Oh,
Do the math, folks. That is
right.
almost 500 episodes, weekly episodes, almost 500 shows that I've done. And every week I'm out there just looking for more people to feature on the show. Just like we, may pre-record some of our shows, but we're always thinking of ideas and things to do because we're doing 52 a year also. And I think we're going into our 4th year together.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of shows, but it's the consistency that should be foremost on your mind. Is I just want to keep going forward, and I want to keep sharing and asking my viewers to share it with other viewers and build your audience that way and your following. Because
I would be lying if I said it's not exhausting at times, and I would be lying if I said there are days that I don't want to do it. I can tell you there has been a lot more days lately that I don't want to do it. It's not because I don't love it. It's just because I got way too much going on outside of work.
Well, and you and I are in the same boat too, that we don't just do one podcast a week. I do 3 every week. You do multiple podcasts every week, and then you take it a step further. You take some of your podcasts, and then you do little video clips and all that you have to produce, and then put those out there too. And each of those takes a certain amount of time, and you have to have the time and the desire to do that.
Which is why I say, yeah, it's great if you do a live, like if you do it live right then and there. Yeah. I think it's, honestly, I don't have the luxury to do that. And I do try to work those in. I need to get better at it, and I think I will now that things are settling down. But you got to have those in the bank, because the reason I get 4 or 5 episodes on my main podcast, done, is for those weeks. I can look at it and go, man, I got 4 weeks that I don't have to record. that I don't have to do anything, and I can start to get to week 2, 3, and go, okay, I'm gonna record at least 2 more and stay ahead of the game. Now, it
Right.
doesn't always work. There's been times, cancellations. I just had a major cancellation on my show not too long ago. I've been working with this person that reached out to me, mind you, and talked about doing something. And after hemming and hawing on what we were going to do, I was like, let's get on my show. Here's the dates. They canceled 3, maybe 4 times. And one of those times was literally the day before we were going to record. Well, I know I've been guilty of canceling and it sucks and I can't avoid it, but now you throw everything into a complete disarray. And I'm moving episodes around, and then I realize I can't move these episodes. I got to come up with an episode. Well, I'll be honest with you. I had a brick wall. I had nothing.
Yeah.
Because I was planning on this guest. So I just did a 35-minute episode of my show, and it was just random. It was literally talking about the night before how I got lost on TikTok. It was talking about movie. Like, whatever. And sometimes you got to be quick like that, and you got to do it. But that can be very discouraging, and it can also make you not want to do it. So if you don't have those episodes in the bag, if I didn't have 3 more episodes recorded, I'd be kind of screwed this month.
Yeah, and our show is a broad spectrum of subjects. It's not like there are some people that, for instance, somebody does a real estate podcast. They're just talking about real estate, the ins and outs, pluses and minuses, but it's a focused area of discussion, and the guests are within that time, that frame too. Ours, we can talk seriously about something one week, and sometimes it's funny. You'll text me and you'll say, "Hey, put this on our list because I want to really talk about this." Sometimes we go to our childhood, sometimes we go to movies, and I enjoy having that broad spectrum of subjects to choose from, rather than if we met every week and just said, "Okay, what was in this week's headlines?"
Yeah, I don't.
You
And
know,
I get that there's a market for it, and clearly people want to do that.
yeah,
And
it's
they
called
want
Saturday Night Live.
right, and everybody got an opinion, so I understand that. But for me, like, even when I do my podcast and I still connect it. Like, there can be, yes, I've had plenty of episodes about stories of my past, things that happened, good, bad, indifferent, opinions on things that have happened, conversations I've had. But then I work in an episode, we got one coming up, or it just happened. My buddy Nick Luck, every year for Star Wars Day, we do a very special Star Wars episode. Well, Star Wars is part of my life. I'm a nerd, and so it still incorporates that life of an average Joe, but it's kind of expanding a little because, look, at some point I'm only 45. And granted, I've done a lot of things and I've got some wild stories, but at some point those stories are done now, and I'm creating new memories, and it's time to kind of dive into some deeper levels. Otherwise the podcast is over,
Right.
And so I struggle with that sometimes because there are certain stories that I've debated if I want to talk about. Is it worth talking about? Is it just interesting to me? What can I pull from it? Is the audience going to laugh, cry, maybe have something to add, or maybe relate to? Or is it just one of those Brandon moments that I just got to keep to myself?
Yeah. And for those that are watching that say, "Hey, I'd like to try podcasting," or so, it's as easy as doing something on your phone. You
Sure.
can do it from your phone. If you have a desktop or a laptop computer, it usually has a built-in microphone and a built-in camera in it, so you can do it. You just need a well-lit room, and you start talking. But the thing is, you have to have something to talk about, and you have to have a time frame, and you have to have some kind of a vehicle to do your recordings, or to do it, whether you're doing it Facebook Live or you're going to do it and record it and then put it out on various platforms. But it's not difficult. The probably the hardest part is just coming up with the idea that you want to do, and then nurse it, work on
The
it.
finding the time to do it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, get yourself a good microphone, because I understand that, like, they all have inner micro, or whatever microphones. You don't want to do that though. even the microphone I have right now, which I really like, and I wanted to plug in my other one, but I just was lazy. Um, it doesn't take long to set up, but this one really, like the one I'm using now, works really good on my like reels and my TikTok videos. Um, it does fine for podcasts, but the one that I record on the most, it's just better filters and sounds better. So I drop $100, or you know what, drop 50 and get a decent microphone,
Right.
and then you know what, take it up. The one I really use has cost me about $120,
Yeah.
and I love it.
And
You
you
know,
also want to have a relatively small space to do your recording in. You don't want to be in the middle of your living room, which you're going to catch echo and any background noises.
and that's fine. Like when you do live stuff, like when we just talked about it, my buddy Steve from the Notes My Goats podcast, they were down here. He was down here for my 27-hour road trip, and we were everywhere. We went to HEB, Mariana's, Dallas, an Irish pub, a
Right.
concert. We're recording on the road, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna have that background. Yeah, I'm not gonna edit that out because that's part of the vibe. That's okay. But if you are sitting down, and right now I've got eggshells around me. I've got one, two, four eggshells, and it does help. And I got this corner, and I'm sitting on my desk right now.
Right.
Right, it works. I mean, my light. I'm not. I need to get a new light. I'm not a fan of this light,
Yeah.
but it works, and you can do it. There's certain things, but you got to figure out what you want to do, how long you want to do it for, and there are those podcasts out there that are short seasons. They're like, hey, this is a 30 episode podcast. This is all I'm doing. And I just want to tell this story,
Right.
or it's a mystery, and there's a market for that. There's a beginning and an end, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But you gotta plan for that, you know?
Yeah. And and you don't have to, I mean, there are probably some people that go out and they want to get a really good microphone and they want to get the whole studio and everything. We both you use a green screen, don't you?
95% of the time, if I'm
Yeah.
doing a lot.
And I use a green screen too. It looks like I'm sitting in a studio, but this is just a studio picture on a green screen that you can do.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're doing the show together, you're broadcasting from the front seat of your automobile.
I've had to do that before. And you can throw, and it's not great, but I've had to do it. I've done it from a hotel room, with no equipment, except for my headphones. There's times too when I do like, especially if I'm going live on TikTok or if I'm doing YouTube stuff. Sometimes I don't use a green screen at all. I just have a spot in my studio, my makeshift studio, and maybe you see like a picture in the background or something that I hang up in my studio. But I won't do it. It all depends on what I'm doing and
Right.
the vibe I'm trying to give off.
And also, it doesn't matter what kind of equipment, what kind of a room, what kind of a chair you're sitting on, where you're doing. The real issue is the content that you're willing to put into your podcast.
Man,
Because the greatest production is going out the window if you don't have something worthwhile to say and the ability and the desire to say it in the right way.
I'm going to tell you right now, I have heard some amazing podcasts that sound great. And I know the editing and what they've done to it, but it's been boring. And it's not just because of the subject. The subject could have been cool.
Right.
It's how they're talking, how they're presenting it. I've also listened to episodes of people that I really enjoy, and it's like every other word is an F-bomb. And look, I'm not saying I don't slip.
Right.
If you go to all my episodes of the Life of an Average Joe podcast, there's probably like 8 or 9 where I'm swearing. And usually it's because I'm at a brewery drinking, but typically, and I'm not putting it down, I just think like if that's your focal point, you think it's funny, you're missing the entire context. You're also like in your audience,
Yeah. If that's the audience that you're aiming for, then go for it. But again, what I said earlier about having that narrow focus audience and all, you want to reach a broader audience, then you have to order a more broader, offering and content.
That's why I like looking at the analytics a lot. And I look at the age demographics and all that.
Yep.
It's really interesting to me because number one, for the longest time, the women that were not listening to my show. But over the last year, I've got that number up and it's like 47%. And I'm like, dude, I got an audience of 47% women. That's great. I'm happy with it. And then I start looking at the ages, and it's like, got a lot of people that are probably half my age that are listening to my show, and it's really interesting. It's interesting to see the demographics where they're coming from, the countries, and all that. Obviously, we're
Right.
not allowed in the country these days, but we've been banned more times than I can think.
Yes.
Um, but it's really cool, and you got to look at that. And for me, like, I want women to listen to the show because number one, it's some of the stories I think they'll find very funny, but some of it is about women. So let's talk about it.
That's right. Exactly. And nothing's off limits. And it's fun to look at those demographics and all and see what's going on, because
Oh,
that again feeds some of the future, broadcasts that you're going to do.
and it's really funny. And one thing you can't get discouraged about. I mean, I get discouraged sometimes, but one thing is I'm playing with my light. It's not working very well. One thing that I get discouraged about sometimes is like you have this banger of an episode, and I'm like, dude, I know this episode was great. And you promote the crap out of it. And you assume that you're going to get X% because that's what you always get. But then it falls below that. And like, no, and that episode has not caught on. And I have several episodes over the years that I thought were great, that were going to just catch on. And they
Yeah.
never did. I'm back to look at them, and I'm like, what happened there?
Yeah. And the opposite is true too. There's like you sign off and you say, yeah, that one was okay. And then all of a sudden the numbers start to go through the roof and you say, what did I say on that grabbed people so much?
I know. And I've had those where I'm like, yeah, it was a fun episode. It was a throwaway, whatever, 45 minutes tops. And then I look on there and it's triple digits in a day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
But then you got episodes, boom, you got and and it's interesting, and that's part of the game. You just got to roll with it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're all about. That's what we do on a regular basis. And we're sure glad that you follow us and you share us with your friends and on various platforms and all. Keep on coming back, because we're gonna keep on coming back too, and doing the shows for you. So
Absolutely. We haven't had a repeat yet, mostly because I keep correcting Stuart. I'm like, nope, we did that show already. Nope, we're not doing it again.
yeah.
Don't ask me how I remember that either, by the way. I don't know.
Right. It just pops in there. So go out, make it a good day. 8 o'clock next Tuesday morning. We'll be right here again. Bye.
Yeah.